Now at this point, your reading ability should have covered everything that happened in the first three parts of this. Now we'll do a fourth part here of getting into higher readings of natural law of existence. Best practices. Okay, we already covered that. You should be there already. Now the question is, what are those? How do you do that? Well, you would need to, in order to do that, bring together the right elements, in this case, say mojos, doing certain things, certain storyline, motifs, spirit forms, whatever. You would need to bring those together in a certain way to get what you want, and then also keep that in a way separate from the rest of, the environment, while also integrated into the environment. So that's what you're going for. You're going for special places where you do special things, so you can work on certain powers, certain relationships, certain spirit forms, etc., certain rituals. And it fits with the rest of the math, the rest of the way that, say, Podlair live their lives as a Podlair practitioner. But there is not a conflict or a withholding. So that would be temples. Now, I use the word temple because it's also on those things you're going to be going to a Podlair school, mojo schools. They are events centers. That's all true. So it has the entire scientific spirituality index. It's a club we hang out to do certain things in. But a temple encompasses all of that and gives it its proper, prestige, its proper respect, because there is nothing that is more important than what humans are doing in their various temples, their various special places they set aside to do certain parts of the human story, to do them better. Again, I'm not teaching this. I'm teaching, but I'm not teaching that. These have been spoken of in other filmings. It's that it is a phenomenon, it is a principle of Podlair, and that if you read, like I said, powers, mojos, story, etc., you will actually be reading this as well, because this is part of natural law. And as your natural law metaphysical muscle gets stronger, you'll be reading all of it better, and that's part of it. Then you have the special places that you think, why is there, I know that I actually do special things in, say, a temple to get, certain peaking that I do, peak pathways being your story. It's sort of like, as let's say an athlete or something, as a metaphor here, you do certain sports, certain activities, but they're not really separate. So for example, you integrate what you eat in the dining part of your life, you actually integrate the relationships in your life, you integrate the training of something in particular, some particular skill. They all go together as part of your life, but they are done in special places to do them best. So that's temples. Temples for these various things. There's temples for every important part of life. However, going in between the one temple of, say, relationships, and then going over to other temples, two things. You can't always stay in that supremely peaked state, so you'll have to have sort of, recovery periods. So that means that temples, there have to be something other than temples. So you can't just go from temple to temple. You will need to sometimes just rest and recover. But the flip side of it is, that needs to be the most conducive thing for doing that. So that brings the idea that you have to have a certain kind of community to live in. You would need to have special spaces to work any kind of human thing to its maximum potential. And then you're going to trade doing that with other activities, but in between, if you live in a atmosphere that has, for example, less distraction. For example, it's not uncommon, like say MMA fighters, just use that as an example, that besides the physical training of going to a certain camp, there's also the location of the camp. They often, I'll keep going.
Case in point.
Case in point. But there's also, exactly, there's isolation, which would allow for that to be done better, so there were no distractions. So let's say you're at some training camp for that, or you're a training camp for mojo reading or life or existence or whatever. You may go from the hanging out with friends by the pool to training in technique to training in physical stuff like weightlifting and cardio, and then also like the dining area. That's all part of one complex. That's important. So each one's like little like temples there, but if the overall grounds are kept distraction free from other things, you can just walk around from temple to temple and you're still really in almost like a resort. a campus of temples. So that's what Padre is. We believe in, you need the temples to do the most heroic living, and you would need to collect all the temples you need into one community where the overall ambiance suits your needs. So to make sure there's no misunderstanding, because of what we covered already in the principles, there is a need to honor your gifts by living the most heroic life you can. That would mean, if you can read correctly, you will see the natural law of this, that humans that actually make special spaces for doing that do better, which means they honor natural law better. Then the community adds another level of spell. Now we're talking to bubble building. There's actually a bubble building video, go look it up. The point is, bubbles exist, starting with your personal people, your solidification thing in your mind's eye. It has to do with what country you live in. It has to do with all those kinds of things. And they're affecting you. If you've been doing the Mojo reading up to this point, you're going to be in touch with your quasi-state and your spirits and dialoguing, and you'll notice dramatic shifts in those based on what temple experiences there are and what surrounds the temple. For example, is the temple just in, like, you know, a war zone? It still has the power of the temples, but it is being affected by the surroundings. If it's a temple and it's surrounded by conducive atmosphere to its temple, you're good to go. And natural law built us to do those special kind of activities in those temples, but actually to have them all work together in one campus. There is no part of our social alchemy and story experience that doesn't fit together. All that's actually meme creations of our civilization, and we have to see clearly through that. So we're not just talking about, again, reading Mojo, we're talking about reading stories, reading history. This is important. As you read Mojos better, you will read history better, because what that all meant, what was happening, will become clearer to you, and thus you are more enlightened. Next, with energy evolving, you must constantly expand. Energy, if you look all throughout nature, it needs to expand in vastness and in complexity. If it does this, it trends into higher energetic forms. If it doesn't do this, it stagnates and eventually will perish if it doesn't move forward. So again, this is reading. Your ability to read that will come from your ability to read any other of the principles of natural law we've covered so far. For this reason, humans need to expand. That is part of the human story. And you can expand in your mind's eye with your personal spirit forms. You can expand in your relationships to others. You can expand what we do with the terra firma we have here on Earth, including the water and living underwater and all kinds of crazy stuff like this, and then also expand outer space and beyond. So outer space, it's like in a physical way, and then here, we can develop it more, and that is expanding on our gift, that tangible gift, and then sort of the intangibles, the relationships we have with others and the relationships with our own spirits, that can just become further and further expanses. So that human need that must be satisfied, if you can read, you can see this. If you can read the animal kingdom at all, you can see this. There's a need to enact the expanding of the story you were built with. So part of the way of humans is we expand. We expand physically, we expand metaphysically. If we cannot, we chafe under that. We chafe under that, and our more emergency programming comes out. So that's important. So that need is there. This means that besides having your temples and then your intentional community around that, it would need to actually expand to all over the world, because the more you learn about your mojo, for example, you see all kinds of Americans who are, for example, Naiji. And the more of them you see, the blonde ones, the brunette ones, the old ones, the young ones, the nice ones, the not so nice ones, etc., your understanding of Naiji-ness, if that's your thing, for example, whatever mojo was, it increases. So your ability to be a hero increases. You're knowing that, you're being able to expand, and that understanding is directly related to your ability to be a hero, which is what you were built to do by natural law, so no one or nothing comes before that. This means if you are enlightened by viewing or interacting with certain things around you, that the more you're able to interact with, the superior your experience will be. This is important now. We're now crossing over to another major set of givens here, which is humans need to expand physically and metaphysically, and that's what natural law built us to do, so that is what is supposed to happen. But that is going to run us into bumping other bubbles. Other bubbles of, right now there's a lot of them, humans that actually don't know what natural law actually wants, And then even when humans are all together, doing the natural law thing together, is they're going to encounter bubbles, maybe other intelligent species, natural phenomena of the cosmos that is going to challenge our story. And we have to be able to unite our energies in order to heroically transcend, to be heroically victorious. That last part is now going to bring us into other elements. That particular part about the fact that of the natural law bubbles other than the pod layer understanding bubble that we'll bump into, such as, rainstorms, they do include other bubbles of humans who don't know what they're doing. So we'll have to be as heroic towards them as we can, using our greatest wisdoms. But we need to make sure we do not take our eyes off of the true one story natural law is teaching us, and us trying to enact heroically the best practices accordingly. So we want the best interactions with people, but it's important to note that natural law is completely backing the play of this is the math, it is beautifully done, and you're supposed to use it in a way that is harmoniously productive. And those that aren't doing it need to convert to doing that, or they need to be gone around, pushed out of the way, whatever. It sounds rough there, but we don't want to actually harm others, but we do need to let truth spread. And there will be discomfiture as our bubble meets other bubbles. The position of pod layer is the position of natural law. Expansion needs to happen. We cannot allow ignorance to actually be honored. We honor humans and things they're attached to. So that's important. That's native to humans and native to pod layer's way of seeing things. But there is a distinction on the quality of attachments. So there is more respect for attachments that humans have that are more in line with natural law, and ones that are outside of natural law, particularly when they are flagrantly, abusively, dangerously, harmfully so. We actually need to see that, and we need to say something about that. That is the math. If we don't do that, we shrink the expansion of natural law through us. Natural law wants us to continue to expand, and that will be allowing ourselves to get gunked up and then honoring the gunk so that we can't continue to move forward as a species, which you can clearly see, if you can see, is the entire intent. This goes back to Yang Yin 1 and 0. The entire intent is for us to move forward until we can't. Not seeing natural law is making that a poor choice. You're not choosing to actively see natural law and be responsible for the outcome of things. This is important. This gets to a lot of models that pod layer disagrees with, is we are responsible for learning natural law, and then we're responsible for enacting it and the consequences that come from it. That's a lot of responsibility, but we got a lot of gifts. With the gifts come responsibility. We are responsible to natural law itself. Instead, pod layer want to constantly expand, and that is because that is what humans were built to do, and if they don't expand, then they stagnate. A big part of that is mojo journalism. You can go see the episode on that. The point is, humans were built to actually understand stories in that way, and if humans are giving off that story, and it's being given off in a way that everyone can see who can read, then it is a story to be talked about because it basically casts a spell that affects everyone. So, for example, if there are mathematically incorrect things being said, we need to correct them, because if that is out there, if various news outlets are stating things about various humans, that the mojo of things, the social alchemy of things, the spirit forms of things actually says that is not probably a correct interpretation of what just happened. We are responsible for that. We're responsible because as a collective, that lessens us. It lessens us to allow that to happen, and we're not built to allow ourselves to voluntarily be lessened. We actually want to elevate ourselves naturally. That's what we're built to do. That's why we strive to get over challenges and obstacles, because there's that will to shine. Again, you will read the will to shine in humans. You'll read the will to shine in the animal kingdom besides us, if you can read. It's a given. it is there and you'll see it. So it's just a question of how long it takes you to get your reading ability to where you can observe that given of natural law. With mojo journalism, there may be those who will feel that reading people's mojo is not appropriate. It is, and natural law says so, because that is just observing the energetic expressions of humans with the energetic expression receiver, satellite dish, whatever you want to call it, the natural law gave us. It gave us these abilities that give off signals, and it gave us the ability to read these signals. So natural law wants us to be talking about it. Now, that may be very uncomfortable to some people to have their energy spoken of in this way, but natural law built it to give off signals that others were built to read. That's actually just the natural law of it. So mojo journalism works on that principle, which goes along the general journalistic principle of freedom of information, freedom of expression. That includes reading people's energies. Whatever energies they give off, they're there to be read. So it is their responsibility to actually be proud of their energy, to be heroic. So that's not an issue for them, because the position is natural law built us to give off signals and built us to read these signals, and it built us to want to improve ourselves and to want to know what story we're in. So if that's what natural law wants, again, we cannot honor memes that actually contradict that. It doesn't matter how long we've been around or what they are invested in currently. That's simply not the will of natural law. And what natural law is doing as energy evolves, we need to pay attention to its aspects. As you become aware of any of the actual principles of natural law and you actually integrate it into your understanding, the other ones will become more obvious to you. So again, work on whatever ones you need to first that are easier for you, but as you keep pulling on this tapestry, you'll see that this is the math as presented by Podlayer. For example, in news stories, you're having different newscasters, or the newscasters have certain demographics. Mixed martial artists have demographics, different artists have different demographics, and you can read this through Mojo. So there's this experience of what is affecting your life. All these different social alchemies and rituals and so forth are affecting you, and you were built to be able to read that, but actually it's important, memes have made you illiterate. So the position of Podlayer is natural law built you with a supreme, in all of energy land, in the whole cosmos, the top fluency. We have that fluency, but then we use memes, which were cool, that added to our fluency, but at the same time, we got possessed by it, and our fluency at languages such as Portuguese, English, whatever, superseded the native most important fluencies, such as mojo, motif, alchemy, spirit forms, etc. Again, get your reading instrument to where it's strong enough to actually see what we're talking about first. Once you do, you'll realize that it is there. So if you keep training your lens on it, when you get developed and strong enough, you'll see that it is there and that it plays out in the way that has been laid out by Podlayer. For example, American Ninja Warrior. Watching it today, it was very moving, inspiring, and part of it was actually following some stories of romantics. There were quite a few romantics in there. Right there, that little exchange right there, that's mojo journalism, and that's actually beneficial for me to observe that, and it's beneficial for you to have heard it from me. Also, this goes back to everything I said so far, if you can read mojos and the motifs and so forth, there is no falsification of this. If you actually read any mojo doing any kind of interaction, you will not find that there is any discrepancy in the natural law that is being presented. Important, you will need to have your lens strong enough to perform these experiments. So start with a very initial experiment of the yang-yin gesturing to begin training your muscle to actually read natural law. And then read that humans need to enact these best practices and how that works, and that's what natural law built us to do, and that clearly trumps any other authority that humans may pretend to have. Podlayer with Mojo Journalism will be putting out stories on everything that's going on out there, and it's going to have a great focus on discovery of new science and so forth, and that's very important to us. But it also includes just covering all kinds of stories. Some of these are controversial, often having to do with commenting on what other humans are doing, particularly those that actually do not believe in the principles of Pod Layer. Whether or not they believe in the principles of Pod Layer and the natural law that it comes from doesn't change the fact that natural law is happening, and they and those who can see this are all in that story together. So they are in our story, and it is part of this natural law story, so we're going to comment and speak in that way regardless of if other humans know that they are in this story. We don't believe it respects their feelings or their peak pathway or their better interest to do so, and above even that, it doesn't respect the wishes of natural law. Natural law, if you can read, does not want that. It wants us to actually expand, to actually see truth, to get stronger. That would make us stupider. That would make us weaker. So natural law doesn't want that. So it would not be in the bigger picture advantageous for anyone to continue to not know what they are and how the world exists. And you need that yourself. You need to speak freely to any natural law you see, including other humans who are not Pod Layer. You need to be able to say the natural law of what you're seeing. Besides their benefit, it is your benefit for your personal growth. You need to be able to speak truth to the best of your abilities in order to understand it the best, in order to be the best hero. So speaking truth about what you see is a cornerstone of Pod Layer, even if that can become a bit uncomfortable or awkward sometimes. And of course, as mentioned, above that is the natural law itself. So their best interests aren't served, your heroic best interests aren't served, the people around you's best interests aren't served, and natural law's interests are not served. And natural law gave us the stuff and wants us to use it well. Therefore, for example, Demas is going to be doing a bunch of dismantling episodes, and people may say, why are you doing that? Well, for many reasons, all of which are valid. They're just the business plan aspect. We actually have a superior product. We actually need to put that out there, and you need to actually compare and contrast with other models in order for your value to be seen, which is important in general, and particularly if you have the superior value, which we do. Pod Layer has the better principles, the better best practices. It understands things better. So the consumers, the public, the client base, the marketplace that is the human species, they need to know. And the quickest, most efficient way for them to realize what is better for them is to compare and contrast it with the lesser grade products that other vendors are giving them that they're currently using. Next, there is the issue of when you try to understand truth, the more untruth there is around you, ambiently or acutely in certain areas, it'll affect your ability to see truth, to read natural law in any area. So you need to actually get rid of impingements in general in order to actually have the confidence and clarity necessary to read Mojo, to read Story, to read, you know what I mean, natural law, to do all those reading. Confidence and clarity. And that means you have to live a certain lifestyle. Part of that means being able to speak your mind. It means being able to look at natural law without being kept from doing so, and then speaking about natural law without being kept from doing so. That's actually what you were built to do, and you need to recognize that, take responsibility for that, and do that. This relates to the dismantlings because the fact, for example, there's typology models out there which has crossover or a relationship to a lot like the Mojo reading, things like that. In a very small level, they're actually doing a very small portion of the actual phenomenon, and they're doing it not right. So small and wrong. However, it does actually have relation because they're trying to speak about the phenomenon. So besides just the general business plan, value added compare and contrast angle, they're simply educating the public. They're ecstatic. There's so much information, and people are actually not going to be able to know everything. So oftentimes their mind gets filled with a certain model or way of thinking. And in order to get them to understand there's a superior natural law, you actually have to say it in a way they understand, which is through the medium of the meme they've known. So, it can be anything. It can be atheism, it can be monotheism, shamanism, conservatism, Green Party. It doesn't matter. There are certain things about that are true to natural law and certain things that are not. So we come at the point of view that we want to say everyone is basically built to be a hero and is trying to do that and has varying degrees of success. So that's cool. But then we have to say how well the given thing they're doing is going, because again, it would help them. It also helps you. If you're trying to actually understand the truth of, for example, Mojo, the fact that there is these incorrect opinions about it, say coming from typology models, it offends natural law. This is important. Natural law, especially coming through humans, is personified, and it is offended that incorrect natural law is being honored over correct natural law, because natural law is, and we were built to read it, and we should be reading to it, and when we read it correctly, the heroic thing to do is obvious. But when we're failing, user error, then we don't read natural law and we don't do the right things in natural law. But that's on us, and natural law is not going to approve of that. It will not allow us to continue going on if we don't actually use the heroic gifts we were given heroically. That's why they're there. For example, you're at a dinner party or something, and no one was necessarily speaking to you directly at the table, but they make a racist comment, for example. That doesn't directly affect you, sort of is the way some people will say it to you, but it does directly affect you. The fact that was said means a fellow human actually thinks that. That's wrong. It means other humans are hearing this and can be tainted by this incorrect statement. That's a problem. It affects your independence of mind because unless you are afraid of repercussions, the thing to do would be to, kindly but firmly correct that. And then if that didn't work, you would increase the firmness until the correction was made. That is how it would be. So it's important to know that that's actually how it works. So when people are making incorrect statements, they are actually poisoning themselves with stupidity, with toxicity. And that fact, and the fact that they are in proximity to other humans, and just the fact you can see them and other humans feel a bond to other humans, and our thinking is affected by the thinking of other humans. It cannot be allowed to allow other humans to go on being deranged. Just, for them, empathetically, that's not right, but then also the rest of the humans are going to have to walk around stupid. No, that wisdom walking around stupid, that doesn't make sense. That's contorting. Now you have to contort as much as you need to in order to energetically, survive and continue your story. But at no point do you stop seeing that math is incorrect. At no point do you stop actually having the desire to say it's incorrect. And at no point is it wrong to use that once you're in a position of appropriate power to actually say what the truth is. So always there's a seeing of it and a desire to say what the truth is. It is important for a person who is, off. It's important for people who are observing this. It's important for you, and natural law. Natural law has an opinion on that. You need to get in line with that opinion. Just to give you examples, these are some principles that come from this. Deems can do full dismantles, but I'll just rattle a few off here. Typology, you've seen the PSAs. I'll just mention on that besides the many reasons that typology is not just inferior to pod layer, but it is a problem for humans. That's important. Everything's not pod layer because it's not seeing that much natural law. It is a competing vendor, so there's a need to compare and contrast, but it is inferior, and there's a great need to actually explain to people that they're using inferior products because it's affecting the global progress of all humans. What other humans are doing with their gifts, it affects the global collective of humans' ability to get heroic tasks done. Astrology, tarot, they have some things that can be helpful to humans in some ways, but largely they are distracting. They base things on stuff that's not really going to help you, but Deems did a great dismantle on that. The point is, as a principle, pod layer, if you've read enough now, you can see it informs on that. It informs on typology model. It's not a typology model, it informs on it. We are not an astrology model like you would say the zodiac, but we can inform on that. The reading ability of pod layer, from powers to story to spirit forms to lifestyle to existence, allows us to inform on that. Monotheism, same thing. That's a belief system. It's a belief system of humans. It is not as superior of a belief system as many other models out there. They are all inferior to pod layer. Some are better than others. Monotheism has a few good things going for it. It has a lot of bad things going for it. And natural law clearly indicates, if you can read up to this point, you can read other models. You can read it and see what natural law's opinion on that would be, because you've read the principles that would apply. So just kind of run through it a little more. Monotheism, again, there'll be a whole dismantling on that, but compare and contrast. Big one jumps out is supreme being. The supreme beings are us. So any model that actually has a supreme being as being something other than humans, that doesn't make any sense. There's no natural law observations you can really bust out that supports that. What else? Buddhism, again, good and bad things there, as with all models, but one of the main issues is that they have a rather unproactive approach to the cosmos. Go with the yin yang. You can look at the yang yin episode that hasn't put out already. That is part of natural law that doesn't agree with Buddhism. Some things Buddhism does are good practices by natural law. Other ones don't really go along with what natural law says is the dealy bob. Hinduism, same thing. Different stuff like their caste system. You can actually look at the natural law things and say that that doesn't actually make sense the way you are categorizing humans and putting them into different places. Natural law doesn't support that. That's a meme thing, and that meme actually contradicts what natural law says, and you don't do that. You don't contradict natural law. Natural law has the final and highest say. Atheists, big thing there is like scientific spirituality index. Atheists tend to be good on certain aspects, particularly on the lower end of the SS index. But as things get more into the story and spirit forming areas, they can sometimes not see that as connected to the overall math of natural law. It is. Podler shows you how you connect those and how you become a good enough a reader to see those connections. So that's there, which means those who actually believe in science actually need to believe in spirits. That's just the way it works. The two are combined, vice versa. Those are into spirits. There's a math to spirits. No, there's no paradox there. There's no separation. They are one thing. It's just a question of how you understand it. Role-playing games, actually that's another one, is people actually spend their time, their money, their interest, their heroic resources in playing various games. There is no better game than the heroic game laid out by natural law. So we'll also be presenting the Podler experience in those terms, in terms of like playing the ultimate game, the greatest game. And therefore, since we also have the greatest game to offer, there is a compare and contrast of all other vendors of games. What makes those games so great for a human to play? There's nothing that can come anything close to the story of the Tribe of Humanity. That is the ultimate heroic story going on there in the cosmos, and playing it is the most awesome experience. So you got Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That is something that has affected a lot of Western culture. Also the chakra system you see in the East as well. They basically go against the scientific spirituality index and the way it works and the way tsunami works and mojo and several other things. So they're evolved for a time, and that the humans really weren't able to be in touch with that understanding, like peaking. Okay, so those were attempts to actually understand human peaking, how that works, but they got it wrong. And you can clearly see that when you can read the math correctly. When you can see it correctly, you can see that Maslow's hierarchy of needs doesn't actually match up correctly, and it just confuses you, makes you deranged with stupidity, as does the chakra system. Again, it can help elevate people who didn't know anything at all, but that's actually a trap though, also, because it teaches a way to sort of elevate up, but it's not doing it the correct way. It's not explaining the actual story of what's going on accurately enough. It's important. These concepts can be updated. They can be updated to have a Podler understanding of things, because Podler doesn't have a problem with cultural metaphor. Cultural metaphor is very, very important, very, very powerful. The question is, do those cultural metaphors, those poetic, those artistic, those spiritual, lifestyle, philosophical memes, do they aid in understanding natural law, or do they get in the way of understanding natural law? For example, with shamanism, folklore kinds of stuff, there is often powerful spirit forming and even understanding existence through that. But there's also being confused by it, so it's a question of what works, what doesn't. There's all kinds of details in this, and Demas will be doing a dismantle on that as well. The kind of main things that pop out as far as like a main principle is it's important to use metaphor in order to enact a spirit-forming experience and to understand existence. So in that aspect, shamanic traditions and so forth, folklore, that's good because it awakens that part of the heroic peak pathway process. The issue is like twofold. One, how accurate are your metaphors to natural law? When you're talking about, say, unicorns and zombies and, flying comets that talk to you, whatever you're going for, does the metaphor aid in understanding truly natural law? That's the first part. Does it aid? Does it help do that, approximate? And a big part of that would be another principle. Are you aware that it's a metaphor? For example, vampire. That actually is a metaphor for a kind of state that a human can be in. It is a good metaphor if, first of all, I guess switch order. First of all, you realize that it's a metaphor. That vampire is a metaphor for humans in a certain state that have ways of being that in a story arc, a character arc kind of way, relate to vampire. But you do understand that it's not actually the fantastical version that you are using to help learn about this principle. So, all those kinds of things, and this is all kinds of traditions, religions, including the Big Five, it's a question of, do your spiritual, philosophical metaphors aid in spirit forming that brings you in proper alignment with natural law or not? So anything that does not actually has to be updated in order that it is actually doing what it was meant to do. Everything was built to continue honoring natural law until it perishes. So if you're not doing that, you're not doing what you're built to do. Then you have philosophies like Nietzsche, Machiavelli's The Prince, Laws of Power, and so forth, Will to Power. Okay, again, there is a huge drive of humans. That's true. Kind of like you've got yin and yang on one side, and you've got like Nietzsche, Will to Power on the other. Neither one of those are actually correct. It is a proactive experience. It is a proactive experience, so that goes against sort of like the kind of Buddhist kind of looking at things in a lot of ways. But then this incredible drive to do does not mean dominate. So that's important. There is a tremendous will to shine. That's the principle Podler has. Humans do come with a tremendous will to shine, which has a yang-yin focus, which goes counter to the yin-yang of, say, Buddhism. But then it also goes counter to the Nietzsche or the Machiavelli or anything like that, where it's like humans were built to like just dominate each other and may the best dominator win. That's not true. And if you can read Mojo and read story, read existence, you'll see that's actually not true. So that's actually a perversion of the actual story. One in a very kind of power-mongering kind of way, and one in sort of like a checkout strategy kind of way. So both are actually incorrect. You actually, as a human, have a tremendous will to shine, a proactive drive to do, to accomplish as a hero. But first of all, that doesn't mean to dominate necessarily in the way that a lot of these other philosophies would say. And there are varieties of humans, so the entire concept of shining and success varies based on Mojo. So that doesn't account for it. Those tend to be rather oriented to like hunter thinking and then warped hunter thinking. So that tends to be warped hunter thinking, and that's sort of like the yin-yang. It's almost like, really worshiping often tower equilibrium, particularly Zai is very fun, but actually just equilibrium in general is kind of like exalted. If you lose equilibrium at any point, that's you being out of sync with natural law. No, that's not the case. So again, look up those things, but Podler, actually, the entire math you're reading informs on the way you look at existence in every facet. It also forms the things like For example, there's a lot of face reading that people try to do these days. You'll see on different shows and whatnot. And the focus of face reading is heavily oriented towards salesmanship and lie detection. And mojo reading will aid in those things, but that's not the purpose. And so most people are reading people in a way with not the focus of the reading process. That's not how humans were built, to read other humans. So doing that really kind of uglifies the process. It takes the process of reading something as a work of art of natural law that it is. That's how we see it. We're reading works of art. And you're basically looking for discrepancies, lying, this and that. Again, that is part of mojo reading, but that's making it very, very, very small. And it inhibits the seeing of the larger picture. So again, with Podler, we believe very much in reading people, but the ways you read humans and the kinds of information that are most important for you to get, that is really, that's the key to the success of what you're doing and the kind of rewards you get from doing it. So those are small rewards due to like the lie detection thing, things like that. But again, mojo will help that. We will be informing on people's work in that as well. But it's important to understand that the more you come at it from a story point of view, the story being a hero, you'll find that all your powers flow more. So that's, again, people who hyper-focus on like lie detection and salesmanship uses of mojo reading, they're missing the bigger picture. And it's our duty, our responsibility as Podler practitioners to ourselves personally say, no, that's not actually how it's meant to be. That's not its higher purpose. And even on the ones that they are doing, they're not doing it correctly in a lot of ways. We need to say it to ourselves. We also need to say it out loud. The public at large needs to be aware of that. So the public, the whole tribe can see the truth. That is the way it's supposed to be. That's the way natural law built it. That's the way Podler practitioners roll. They roll with natural law. Next, the war on stupid. If you're able to read mojos, going back to being able to read the stress on them, but you also be able to read their stress, you'll be able to read derangements, you'll be able to read all kinds of things, and there's no way around it. We are in a state of emergency. So right now, Podler is going to have, for example, sometimes anger in its tone. That's appropriate. A lot of people are saying, why are you so angry? As if we're off. No, we're not off. We are actually heroically upset because humans are actually doing dangerous stuff that's causing us harm and is going to make us not do well in the game of life that's been given to us. So that is actually a huge problem, and it demands a vigorous, energetic, a ferociously energetic response, because when animals or any creature are in a crisis, they need to really summon themselves ferociously in order to get through it. If they don't, then they won't make that Darwinian curve. So it's important right now that humans are being massively improperly impinged on. You can clearly read that, you can read. Then that means that we need to actually make that stop being the case. This relates, for example, to the PSAs going out to people. People may actually object to that. The principle on that, again, goes to mojo journalism. But like an extension of mojo journalism is the story we're covering is the story of an emergency. So we are under emergency protocols, and we are correct to do so. The natural law principle says that is the correct way to go. That is the protocol to have. You don't keep that same protocol when we get into a different position, but right now the whole globe of the human species is in a state of emergency. We need to conduct ourselves accordingly. To not conduct yourself accordingly, that would be to not see and honor natural law. That's like actually experiencing or being right near a car crash and actually not registering that that just happened. Like that's a normal occurrence. That's not a normal occurrence. There's people bleeding and trying to actually kick the door out so they can get out before the car blows up. You should have an emergency reaction to that. To not have that means you are not reading existence correctly. That's important. To disassociate from that and just acknowledge your master's dissociation, that's not the correct thing. It may be to survive, but it's not for understanding. Not for understanding and not for proactive heroic action. There's the mentioning of being a heroic pioneer. That's because you need to overcome challenge as a human, and there will be challenge. those are two givens. Natural law is going to continue to give us challenges. We were built to overcome these challenges, and we overcome these challenges and do the best and get the best rewards when we enact the spirit of a heroic pioneer. Trying to be a heroic pioneer will allow us to do what natural law gave us to do as best as possible. So those who object to those kinds of wordings and evoking those kind of spirits, that shows they really don't understand anything. So first of all, we're in a state of emergency right now, so we would all have to be heroic pioneers just because of that. But even if we were not in a state of emergency, we would be in a state of mystery or opportunity. And it doesn't matter which one of those you're in, emergency, mystery, or opportunity, being a heroic pioneer would allow you to do it best. And that's what you're here to do. You're here to be the best human you can be. Going along with being the best hero you can be and in the state of emergency, is there something called the visionary vanguard. This is another principle of Baudelaire, there's many. This relates to the fact that we are moving fast and we need to save everyone. And if we stopped and gave care and special attention to whichever humans we bumped into first or contacted us first, and took as long as it took to take them to where they could help us save the world, it wouldn't get done. Okay? So it's important that we are going to save everyone, but the logical principle here of natural law, and go ahead and try to find somebody to invalidate this, you won't be able to. It's just not true. The way it does work is you need to actually save those that actually can help save others. So you want to save those who can be saved with the least amount of energy and will turn around and help in the saving of others. In the Visionary Vanguard, we'll be leading in Baudelaire. We're going to be giving out these instructions to everyone to do, but the ability to help get everyone out of a state of emergency makes it so that we have to constantly make sure that only the absolute top heroic operatives are doing the visionary vanguard work, and anyone that is not able to continue doing that kind of work or cannot go up doing that, they just kind of move into whatever position they can actually give the most harmonious productivity to natural law. That's what everyone should do. So you kind of find where your groove spot is, and always you're trying to elevate, elevate, elevate. So that means that right now, when we're moving in emergency, that we have to look out for people who can jump in the easiest, and for people who are able to help push the truth message out there the strongest. Baudelaire is there for everyone, and there will be facilities and equipment and experiences for everyone. But in order to make those experiences, we have to keep pushing the truth of Baudelaire out there. And to do that, we're going with the principle that we must lead with those that actually have, the strongest abilities, the best energies, that are able to help connect Baudelaire to new areas of the world, so that Baudelaire can expand, 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 and thus help everyone. Because everyone will be benefited the more that Baudelaire expands. But to do that, we kind of have to make the visionary vanguard like this unstoppable force of enlightenment going forward. So everyone should want that, and they should actually understand that's how it works. Because as a principle, people coming into Baudelaire, they may actually say, oh, self-help, I want that. And Baudelaire does offer that. But there's a whole line of products that Baudelaire offers. And the main product we're offering right now is those who actually are wanting to be like revolutionaries for enlightenment and actually change their life and everything around them, and help Baudelaire do that. They're very geared up to do that. That's the place they're in. Those are the ones that you would actually try to get out of being in the deranged lands first. And then you'd use that to leverage everything else. So that is a very logical way to go about the humane task of saving the world. But that does mean sort of like a triage ordering. So there's a principle to like the triage ordering of saving human souls. You want to save everyone's souls, but you actually have to try and get everyone. And that means actually going after particular people to save first in order to build momentum, enough momentum to save everyone. That pretty much lays it out from the beginning of seeing the basic phenomenons all the way to their implications, and then what you are supposed to do about it and how that applies to the rest of the world you live in. So boom. Start to finish there, to infinity, okay? Now, I'll just kind of wrap it up with like a sort of high-level encapsulation. I'll go with 1, 2, 4, 8. So the one is the natural law of energy evolving. That runs everything. There is nothing outside of that. There is no different entities or supreme beings that actually show themselves to be above the natural law of energy evolving. Okay, that is the supreme force, the supreme conveyor of where energy is evolving to, its trajectory. So it is a question of being able to surf those waters. People may say, like, isn't there something else? No, there is nothing else but the natural law of energy evolving. If humans, for example, were somehow like, make extra dimensions and do this or do that, that would still be natural law happening through the humans. If right now we make AI, that's not outside natural law. That's just a form of natural law we haven't seen before, and it came from us. Humans will make that. What made humans? Natural law. So that's just a continuation of natural law. There's always new natural law happening all the time, but there's a way it happens, and it's a continuation of one thing. In the end, there is one way, the way of energy evolving, the natural law of energy evolving. And the question is, do you see this way? Do you see this natural law? And are you walking it? Are you honoring it? So that's the one. The two, binary flow. Everything's a binary flow of opposites, but there's a union of opposites. So the union of opposites makes up the energy evolving. But you can always take energy evolving and breaking it down into these kind of like yang yin sort of dichotomies that push and pull on one another. So that is a way that you can understand all existence, and everything that you've seen so far, like the rituals, spirit forms, mojos, pod powers, alchemies. You can break them all down to ones and zeros, yang and yin. So everything can be broken down in that way and then layered back up with no loss of fidelity. And it is yang before yin. So that is the two. Four, there are four languages of understanding. There is the language of mojo, which you should be able to read by now. There is the language of spirit forms, which comes from being able to read the mojo. There is the language of memes, which would be fairly obvious. There's another language that is separate but connected to mojo language and spirit form language. And then there is the language of energy itself, like gravity, the language of gravity. That language is a different way of understanding, but is connected to the other four languages. Each of these four languages, you actually can look at it from the entire phenomenon of it and your place within it. And that's how the 8 pathways come about. So you've got the 1 of everything is energy evolving, going into the 2 of all energy evolving is a combination of binary flow, which creates a union of opposites, and that can be understood in 4 languages, and those 4 languages can have a subjective and objective kind of understanding, a one or the all experience, and that makes the 8 pathways of Podler theory. Mojo Dojo, Mojo or mentorship, Temple of Spirits, Spirit Ambassador, Outpost Organizing. What else is there? There is the Energy Evolving, there is the Ritual Requirements, oh, and before that, there is Outpost Organizing, Podler Productions. Okay, so those are the 8 pathways. And they basically help organize everything you've seen so far, which is kind of like almost a sequential layout of an enlightenment obstacle course. But this, if you would understand as a life discipline, that is actually the most efficient way of understanding it. The 1 into the 2, to the 4, to the 8. So sort of laid it all out from beginning up to infinity. And then we went into an encapsulation of how you can kind of see that as a way to study life and existence. And now I'll close out with just a closing statement. We're not saying we have all the answers. We are saying that the answers we do have are correct. They are more correct on more things, and we are more ambitiously pursuing new discoveries of natural law than any other group, people, model, theory, belief, or way. Podler has the ever-growing best practices for how to be a human and gain meaning from existence. Okay, that is basically a laying out of our beliefs, what we believe in and why, and what we're going to be doing with them. So, go ahead, take a look, and you will see that this is in line with natural law, and being in line with natural law is what you want to do, so you can actually have the productive harmony that a hero deserves, and deserves to actually experience not just herself, but through the rest of the tribe. And then, we can just see how far this energy evolving thing can really go.